Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and thank you for joining me. So glad to have you, whether you are on Facebook or perhaps on Twitter. Also on McDuff Lives 2, my backup channel, while McDuff Lives 1 is in YouTube jail. And my very, very best, and that is my Rumble channel. And if you haven't joined my Rumble channel yet, well, please do, because we're going to do exclusive broadcasts on the Rumble channel. We will not be sharing our Rumble material if it has to do with things that are particularly a little bit scary to the folks at YouTube. They start trembling when they see me now. They get their strike button ready and they're all ready to just push that button. So they will not have the privilege of hearing our thoughts on such important issues of the day, but you will as long as you sign up for our Rumble channel. It's McDuff Lives on Rumble. And Corky, hi, how are you, my friend? Um, a word about the chat room. There is apparently a chat room. There's a chat room on Rumble, which I don't see. And that's kind of a problem for me because I want folks to go to Rumble. But if you're there, I may not see you. Let me see what happens if I open a Rumble channel. Excuse me for fooling around a little bit, but I've got to learn this stuff. Let's go to my. Let's see my video, and let's see. Well, I can see that. Okay, I better not let the sound come up on that, but I'm looking over at the Rumble channel, but it's apparently doing a replay for me, so it's starting from the beginning. Anyway, more will be revealed. There is nobody in the live chat over on the Rumble channel right now, so that's not a big deal. Okay, forgive me for taking up a minute or two learning a little bit more about Rumble and how I can use it best to present our material. Okay. All right, Christy says I'm live on Rumble. And okay. Hello, Jimmy Beam. Hello, Laura and Corky and everyone else who's joining us wherever you are. Facebook comments do get fed to my stream here on StreamYard, which is the main app that sends the video out to the other apps. But I don't see Rumble, and that's because it hasn't got a special connection like YouTube and Facebook have created with the StreamYard people. And I hope Rumble can reach out, or StreamYard reach out and work out something like that too. But I'm glad to see I am live on Rumble. Thank you for Christy for reporting that to me. I went to look at it, but it started at the beginning, and I don't know how to manipulate myself to the current exact moment. So therefore, I'm going to let it go for now. So much happening. I am really, really encouraged by the work of J.J. Couey and Paul Alexander and Mark Kulak at Housatonic Live, Dr. Dennis Rancourt, and there's more, but those four, I think, are the core of what I find to be a solid lead into what's really going on. And I think, to look at J.J. Couey's channel, it's called Gigaome Biological, and it's on Twitch only. So there's another one to get familiar with, which is Twitch. I am not there yet. However, I will be joining Brighteon soon. and I will be joining Rock Finn after that. We're doing one at a time. Okay, now to the content, and let's see, it's about 10 minutes. Let's see, it's about 9 minutes after the hour, so in case I want to cut the early stuff, I know where to cut it. All right, we started with Ordo ab Chao, the book, the multi-volume work by David Livingstone, and I chose the Cliveden Set as the first part to really dig into. It is in the third volume of his work, and that third volume has, let's see, 23 different topics in it, of which the Cliveden Set is only one of them, and that is number 15. But because of the personalities that are mentioned here and the connections that are just unavoidable, I think it's really a good place to start. So we began with an allegation by a man named Dietrich Bronder that Hitler was Jewish. Also Rudolf Hess, Goebbels, Himmler, Ribbentrop, and a man whose importance will keep coming back in this story, Franz Hanfstaengl, 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 and then a couple of groups called Aufbau and Tula, the Thule Society in English, or Tula in German, Alfred Rosenberg and Karl Haushofer. And these men also had close associations with members of the Round Table, known as the Cliveden Set. Okay? We're talking about the prime ministers, Baldwin, MacDonald, Chamberlain, and people that were, running the government policy. A mention of Milner's kindergarten included Philip Kerr, I pronounce it Carr, I believe that's correct, and who was later Lord Lothian, Lord Halifax, Lionel Curtis is an important name among these, and they continued to pursue Milner and Rhodes's agenda. Especially in South Africa, as you know about, a person named Waldorf Astor, which was a name that shocked me. I did not know they had put Waldorf and Astor into the same name, but there he is, the second Viscount Astor, whose dates are 1879 to 1952. So he died the year I was born. John Jacob Astor IV, the robber baron, of course, who's the source of the funds, died in the Titanic in 1912. Well, a number of notable British people are now connected to this Cliveden Set, along with the Germans we just spoke of. And now let's bring in the Fabians and their successors, Viscount Northcliffe, who was appointed director for propaganda under David Lloyd George and who headed the Tavistock Institute. Now, the Tavistock Institute is going to be the subject of our second show, and I'm delighted that she's agreed to come back with Courtney Turner on Thursday night, 8 p.m. We will be talking about propaganda, and we will focus on not only Edward Bernays, but the Tavistock Institute, and moving forward to a Bernays descendant or relative, Mark Bernays Randolph, co-founder of Netflix. So that will be some more material leading out of this study of the Cliveden Set today. Okay, Lord Astor became the chairman of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, RIIA, and you know that maybe as Chatham House, a current often topic of Harley Schlangers, who will be with me tomorrow at this time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Um, and Lionel Curtis, who also helped found the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. So you can see the connection between the Cliveden Set, the Round Table, the Fabians, and now the New York people, represented by Lionel Curtis, founding the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. George Bernard Shaw, Charlie Chaplin, H.G. Wells, Winston Churchill, many, many names come up in the reading, and we are going to move on to our where we left off. But we have to mention first the Harvard Club because of my dad's being a member of the Harvard Club of Washington when he was working in the FBI and here in Washington, D.C. during his career, and a graduate of the class of 1942, during which time this Ernst Hanfstaengl, who was a class of 1909 of Harvard, visited Harvard. I believe it was 1941, and let's see, was friends with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, another Harvard man. Well, a lot to be said about Hanfstaengl. We'll skip through it. He's connected to Aleister Crowley, of course. That makes a lot of sense. The Mitford sisters, fascinating account of them. One of them um, goes out with Hitler. The other one becomes a communist. The next one decides to be a follower of Oswald Mosley. Well, all of these characters in the last reading lead us up to the introduction of Pamela Harriman. And that's where we left off. So let me call up to the screen this picture of Pamela Harriman. And we will share the screen from here on out in case you want to slow it down and read the text later. Pamela Harriman, née Digby, 1920 to 1997, the great niece of Jane Digby and Winston Churchill's son, Randolph. Okay. Unity, that's one of the Mitford sisters, was a friend of Pamela Harriman, the great-great-niece of Jane Digby, who, quote, coaxed Unity into taking her to tea with Hitler, unquote, in 1937 in Munich. Pamela, then 17, was there attending boarding school. In 1939, while working at the Foreign Office in London doing French to English translations, Pamela met Winston Churchill's son, Randolph. As he was heading off to war and convinced he would die, and having already been turned down by 8 other women, Randolph proposed to her immediately after dinner. Pamela accepted, and they had a son named Winston, reflecting Pamela's warm relationship with her father-in-law. Shortly after giving birth, Pamela and the newborn were photographed by Cecil Beaton for Life magazine, its first cover of a mother with baby. She moved into 10 Downing Street when Churchill became prime minister. Lord Beaverbrook became her mentor. Franklin Roosevelt's envoy, Harry Hopkins, became her friend, and she had an affair with W. Averill Harriman, through which she became a back channel to U.S.-British negotiations. When she lived in Munich before the war, Unity had befriended Ernst Hanfstaengl and lived in his sister Erna's house. Some authorities suggest that Hitler was romantically involved with Erna or had romantic affections for her. Some authorities suggest that Hitler was romantically involved with Erna. I'm sorry, I just read that one. Unity shot herself in the head days after Britain declared war on Germany, but failed to kill herself and eventually died of pneumococcal meningitis at West Highland Cottage Hospital, Oban. However, investigative journalist Martin Bright, as revealed in an article in The New Statesman, has discovered evidence suggesting that Unity may have faked her injuries to hide the fact that she was carrying Hitler's child. Nazi princess. Princess Stephanie Juliane von Hohenlohe. In Paris, Diana and Oswald Mosley were long-term neighbors and close friends of American socialite divorcee Wallace Simpson. Wallace's first divorce was to Earl Winfield Spencer, Jr., a U.S. Navy aviator, after she reportedly had an affair in China with Count Galeazzo Ciano, later Mussolini's son-in-law and foreign minister. Now, Count Ciano is a very, very important man in World War II, so just remember his name, Count Ciano, he's called. Later Mussolini's son-in-law and foreign minister, and became pregnant, leading to a botched abortion that left her infertile. At the time, Wallace began her affair with Edward, then Prince of Wales. She was married to Ernest Aldrich Simpson, an Anglo-American shipping executive. Duke Karl Alexander of Württemberg told the FBI that Wallace and leading Nazi Joachim von Ribbentrop, the German ambassador to Britain in the 1930s, had been lovers in London. Ribbentrop, a protege of Ernst Hamstengel, was also close friends with Aufbau member Karl Haushofer, Elsa Lasker-Schuler, Paul Klee, Romano Guardini, and Rainer Maria Rilke. Of course, he was the novelist. During the 1930s, Gestapo officer Karlfried Graf von Dürkheim had become chief assistant to Ribbentrop. Then it was discovered that Dürkheim was of Jewish descent. His maternal great-grandmother was the daughter of the Jewish banker Solomon Oppenheim. And he was also related to Meyer Amschel Rothschild. He was therefore considered a Mischling and had become politically embarrassing. Ribbentrop decided to send him to Japan, where he coordinated the dissemination of Nazi propaganda in Japan, likening German military ideals to Japanese Bushido, and encouraging the idea that Japan and Germany would share the world. Dürkheim was arrested by the Allies during their occupation of Japan and served more than a year in prison as a member of the Gestapo. Wallace was also a friend of Princess Stephanie von Hohenlohe, known as the Nazi princess, who was also a member of the Cliveden Set. Born Stephanie Juliane Richter as a commoner, allegedly of Jewish family background, Stephanie became an Austrian princess by her marriage to the diplomat Prince Friedrich Franz von Hohenlohe-Waldenburg-Schillingswerst, a member of the princely Hohenlohe family, who had been head of Austro-Hungarian intelligence in that country in World War I. The head of Austro-Hungarian intelligence in World War I, well, that is a definite precursor to the Five Eyes, isn't it? Stephanie relocated to London after her divorce from the prince, where she is suspected of having acted as a spy for Germany during the 1930s. Her close friends included Margot Asquith, the widow of the former Prime Minister H.H. Asquith, Lady Ethel Snowdon, the wife of a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Lady Londonderry and her husband, Charles Vane Tempest Stewart, the 7th Marquess of Londonderry. Stephanie had developed friendships with powerful and influential men, including Harold Sidney Harmsworth, the first Viscount Rothermere, an Anglo-Irish tycoon who took over ownership of the influential Daily Mail and Daily Mirror from his brother Alfred Harmsworth, the later Viscount Northcliffe, who had been director for propaganda under David Lloyd George during World War II and who was appointed head of the Tavistock Institute. Sorry about all the names. Just take a second and realize that these are the same names getting recycled. This First Lord Viscount Rothermere, we mentioned in the first section of part of this reading, and the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror, well, that's important. More important that he owns them than to really follow, the given name versus the nobility title, which the British always make you do. They tell you it's the guy's name, and then they refer to him as Lord so and so, and you don't realize that they're talking about the same person. Come on, British, clean up your writing, would you? All right, so that's the problem. Is there are not that many people, but they have different titles. And under David Lloyd George, who appointed him the head of the Tavistock Institute. So there you go. The newspapers and the Tavistock Institute. What does that tell you? Rothermere was an early admirer of Hitler, and in the early 1930s, he advocated an alliance with Germany. For a time in 1934, the Rothermere papers, the only major papers to champion Mosley's British Union of Fascists. On January 15th, 1934, the Daily Mail published an editorial written by Rothermere titled, quote, "Hurrah for the Black Shirts," unquote, praising Oswald Mosley for his sound, common-sense conservative doctrine. According to Louis P. Lochner in his book Tycoons and Tyrants, German Industry from Hitler to Adenauer, Rothermere provided funds to Hitler via Ernst Hanfstaengl. Does that tell you why he toured the U.S. in 1941? Adrian Addison, the author of Mail Men, the unauthorized story of the Daily Mail, claims that Rothermere, quote, began to fully embrace the Nazi cause, unquote. In November 1933, Rothermere gave Stephanie the task of establishing personal contact with Hitler. Stephanie went to Berlin and began an affair with Fritz Wiedemann, one of Hitler's personal aides. Wiedemann reported back to Hitler that Stephanie was Rothermere's mistress, and Hitler decided that she could be of use to the government. The following month, Wiedemann arranged for Stephanie to have her first meeting with Hitler, when she delivered a personal message from Rothermere. According to Stephanie, the day Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany in 1930, Rothermere told some of his staff, quote, "Remember this day, Hitler is going to rule Germany. The man will make history, and I predict he will change the face of Europe," unquote. Stephanie also developed a friendship with von Ribbentrop. During visits to Germany, she had become closely acquainted with members of the Nazi hierarchy, including Adolf Hitler, who called her his dear princess. She developed a close friendship with Hermann Goering, and Heinrich Himmler declared her an honorary Aryan. In a 1938 MI6 report, British intelligence said of her, quote, "She is frequently summoned by the Führer, who appreciates her intelligence and good advice. She is perhaps the only woman who can exercise any influence on him," unquote. During the 1930s, she was awarded the Gold Medal of the Nazi Party for her services. In August 1935, Stephanie was invited by Hitler, along with her friend, Fabian Society member Ethel Snowden, to attend the Nuremberg Nazi Party rally. She later wrote about the, quote, "tribal excitement of Nuremberg, a shrine of Nazism, an orgy of dedication to the Nazi creed," unquote. Snowden wrote an account of the rally in the Daily Mail. Soon afterwards, an MI5 agent recorded that Princess Stephanie and Lady Snowden had, quote, "formed a most intimate friendship." Stephanie's attendance at the rally upset Unity Mitford. Princess Carmencita Rueda claims that Unity was very jealous of Hitler's relationship with Princess Stephanie. Quote, "She complained that Stephanie Hohenlohe was Jewish and how she had told Hitler, 'Here you are, anti-Jewish, yet you have a Jew around you the whole time, this Princess Hohenlohe.'" Hitler said nothing. She simply hated the Hohenlohe for a ruse, going to tell Lord Rothermere what Hitler was up to. I asked her why she got so upset about it, and the answer was short: jealousy again. Unquote. Likewise, Ernst Hamstengel warned Hitler that Stephanie was, quote, a professional blackmailer and a full-blooded Jewess, unquote. Pardon me a moment. All right, who's next up? That's right, it's Prince Philip. Yeah, that Prince Philip. Yeah, look at his friends. Prince Philip at his sister Cecile's funeral in Nazi Germany in 1937. Philip is flanked by grieving relatives, all wearing distinctive Nazi uniforms. One is clad in the uniform of the Brown Shirts. Another wears full SS regalia. Another member of the Hohenlohe family was Gottfried, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, whose dates are 1897 to 1960, who was the first child of Ernst II, Prince of Hohenlohe-Langenburg, and his wife, Princess Alexandra of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Yes, our friends from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, the great Windsor family. Daughter of Alfred, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia. Through his maternal grandparents, he was a great-grandson of Queen Victoria and of Tsar Alexander II. Gottfried married Princess Margarita of Greece and Denmark, the sister of Prince Philip, husband of the reigning Queen Elizabeth II of England. The Prince of Wales' niece, Philip's father, Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, was a grandson of Christian IX of Denmark and Louise of Hesse-Kassel. Prince Andrew's mother, Olga Konstantinovna of Russia, granddaughter of Tsar Nicholas I, a niece of Tsars Alexander II, and first cousin of Tsar Alexander III. Philip's mother was Princess Alice of Battenberg, a daughter of Prince Louis of Battenberg and Princess Victoria of Hesse, and by Rhine, King Edward VII's niece. Andrew and Alice were closely related to the ruling houses of the United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, Denmark, and Greece, and their wedding was one of the great gatherings of the descendants of Queen Victoria and Christian IX of Denmark, held before World War I. Okay, and now there's a chart here, the genealogy of Prince Philip, which I invite you to stop and study as you play back the video, and I will kind of skip through it. Anyway, all of those connections basically tell you that Prince Philip is related to the Russian royalty. Isn't that important when we talk about white Russians and Brits working together? I think it's very important. Yeah, this David Livingstone does a hell of a job with his genealogy. I've looked up a few of things, and I find the so far the footnotes have all panned out correctly. All right, and then Prussians and Danes and all the royal families of Northern Europe, at least, are represented in Prince Philip. Yes, Prince Philip, the guy that said, which got my When I quoted him one time, YouTube took my entire show down just for quoting what he said about wanting to come back as a what? A deadly virus after he died. Creepy, isn't it? Prince Philip served in the British Navy during World War II, while all four of his sisters were married to Germans, three of whom had Nazi connections. His sister Cecile married Georg Donatus, hereditary Grand Duke of Hesse, and both joined the Nazi Party. Of Philip's brothers-in-law, Berthold Margrave of Baden, who married Philip's sister Theodora, was invalided out of the Wehrmacht in 1940 after an injury in France. Members of the Nazi Party from 1937, Gottfried and Margarita, used their family connections to promote a rapprochement of Nazism within the United Kingdom, though without success. Gottfried was a German soldier in World War II, becoming severely injured in the Russian front. He was dismissed from the army after the abortive attempt on Hitler's life on the 20th of July, 1944. Prince Christoph of Hesse, whose dates are 1901 to 1943, who married Prince Philip's sister Sophie, was his cousin. Who was his cousin? Okay, Prince Philip's sister Sophie was Prince Christoph's cousin, whom she married. Fought on the German side and was a member of the Nazi Party and the Waffen-SS. Christoph was the fifth son of Prince Frederick Charles of Hesse and Princess Margaret of Prussia, the sister of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Christoph's mother was the daughter of Emperor Frederick III and of Victoria, Princess Royal. Christoph was a director in the Third Reich's Ministry of Air Forces, commander of the Air Reserves, and held the rank of Oberfuhrer in the SS. His brother Philip, Prince and Landgrave of Hesse, joined Hitler's SA. After she married Christoph, Sophie met Hitler at Goering's wedding in 1935, and they later invited him to their home. In a previously unpublished memoir written in her old age, Sophie recounted, quote, "I have to say here that although Christoph and I changed our political view fundamentally some years later, we were impressed by this charming and seemingly modest man and by his plans to change and improve the situation in Germany," unquote. All right, here we go. Duke and Duchess of Windsor. Edward, Duke of Windsor, and Wallace Simpson meeting Hitler in 1937. On the 20th of January 1936, George V died at Sandringham, and the Prince of Wales ascended the throne as King Edward VIII. Constitutionally, the king was required to be in communion with the Church of England, but his proposed marriage conflicted with the Church's teachings against the remarriage of divorced people if their former spouse was still alive. Refusing to abandon his relationship with Wallace, Edward signed the Instrument of Abdication on December 10, 1936. Edward left Britain for Austria, where he stayed at Schloss Enzesfeld, the home of Baron Eugene, I'm going to say Eugene because I think it's French, Daniel von Rothschild, and Baroness Kitty de Rothschild. Eugene's mother was Bettina Caroline, the niece of Baron Nathan Meyer Rothschild. Remember who he is? He's the guy that, did the War of 1812 thing and didn't care who rules the country as long as he can control the currency, the famous one. So she's the niece of Nathan Meyer Rothschild and the niece of Edmund James de Rothschild. Wallace and Edward married on June 3, 1937 at the Chateau de Condé. At the request of Britain's Queen Mary, Hermann Goering granted safe passage to Eugene's brother, Baron Louis de Rothschild of Vienna. Wedding guests included Randolph Churchill, Baron Eugene and Kitty Rothschild, and the best man, Major Fruity Metcalf, who was Oswald Mosley's brother-in-law and a member of the January Club, a right-wing association affiliated with Mosley's British Union of Fascists. The Chateau de Condé was lent to the Duke and Duchess by French millionaire Charles Bedeau. Bedeau's wedding present was a statue entitled Love by Annie Hupkin Hempel, the lover of Hjalmar Schacht, who had introduced Bedeau to Fritz Wiedemann. In 1938, according to Charles Higham, author of Trading with the Enemy, Wiedemann appointed Bedeau as head of IG commercial operations on behalf of what he called the fraternity. Of course, IG means IG Farben. At his office on the 53rd floor of the Chrysler Building in New York, Bedeau was often met with his friends Lamont Dupont, Standard Oil President Walter Teagle, and Hermann Schmitz, the CEO of IG Farben. Bedeau was selected by Heinrich Himmler to ensure the Duke's political and economic commitment. Bedeau later arranged for a visit for the Duke and Duchess of Windsor to Germany in October 1937, paid by the Third Reich, where they publicly met Hitler. The Duke and Duchess also visited Karenhall, Hermann Goering's estate. At the same time, the Duchess took afternoon tea with Hitler's deputy Rudolf Hess. During a dinner with Joachim von Ribbentrop in Berlin, they also met Albert Speer and Joseph and Magda Goebbels, who were very impressed. Joseph later wrote in his diary, quote, "The Duke is wonderful, a nice, sympathetic fellow who is open and clear and with a healthy understanding of people. It is a shame he is no longer king. With him, we would have had entered into an alliance," unquote. On October 19th in Nuremberg, Wallace and Edward had dinner with the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, who was a male-line grandson of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The Duke was a first cousin of King George V and Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. Wilhelm II showed such interest in his young cousin's upbringing that Charles Edward was known amongst the imperial court as the Emperor's seventh son. Charles Edward joined the Nazi Party in 1933 and became a member of the SA, rising to the rank of Obergruppenführer by 1936. He also served as a member of the Reichstag representing the Nazi Party from 1936 to 1945. Hitler and Charles Edward, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha Center. The visit tended to corroborate the strong suspicions of many in government and society that the Duchess was a German agent. Edward gave a Nazi salute when he was greeted by the SS Death Head Division at the Nazi training school in Pomerania. Edward gave a second salute when the couple then met Hitler himself at the Berghof in Obersalzberg on October 22nd, who addressed Wallace as, quote, Royal Highness, unquote. Wallace was apparently struck by the inner force of the Führer. According to Hitler's translator, he said of Wallace, quote, "She would have made a good queen." On the Prince of Wales, Albert Speer quoted Hitler directly, saying, quote, "I am certain through him permanent friendly relations could have been achieved. If he had stayed, everything would have been different. His abdication was a severe loss for us." Years later, Diana Mosley claimed that the Duke and Duchess shared her and her husband's views that Hitler should have been given a free hand to destroy communism. The former Austrian ambassador, Count Albert von Mensdorf-Puyi-Dietrichstein, who was also a second cousin once removed and friend of George V, believed that Edward favored German fascism as a bulwark against communism, and even that he initially favored an alliance with Germany. The Duke and Duchess's visit attracted the interest of the FBI. In September 1940, a report to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover said, quote, "For some time, the British government has known that the Duchess of Windsor was exceedingly pro-German in her sympathies and connections, and there is strong reason to believe that this is the reason why she was considered so obnoxious to the British government that they refused to permit Edward to marry her and maintain the throne." Unquote. So that's significant to me because of my father's subsequent, association with J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, which he joined in 1949, straight out of law school, and was with the FBI for 10 years, or 11 or 12, until 1962, when he transferred to SACSA at the Pentagon. So, we have the Venona files, and we have a lot of interesting hints that Hitler was well known to Hoover. And while Hoover's focus always was mainly on communism, and that deserves a major asterisk, because that's his main thing, he was also an American nationalist who was against the influence of Hitler and Nazism in America, too. That's a point that a lot of people probably would want to argue with me. The Munich Agreement. Adolf Hitler greets Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain on the steps of the Berghof, September 15, 1938. Joachim von Ribbentrop stands on the right at the Munich summit. According to MI5, the list of people she had been associating with over the last few years included the Duke of and Duchess of Windsor, Prince George, Duke of Kent, Walter Rothschild, 2nd Baron Rothschild, Lady Ethel Snowdon, and Cliveden Set member Philip Carr, the 11th Marquess of Lothian. As a prominent Zionist leader, Walter Rothschild was presented with the famous Balfour Declaration, which pledged to a Jewish national home in Palestine. A round table member, Lothian was private secretary to Prime Minister David Lloyd George between 1916 and 1921. Lothian believed that Germany had been treated unfairly and harshly by the Treaty of Versailles, and after its signing, he became a steadfast advocate of revising the treaty in Germany's favor throughout the 1920s until March 1939, a policy known as appeasement. The term appeasement most often applied to the foreign policy of the British governments of Prime Ministers Ramsay MacDonald, Stanley Baldwin, and most notably Neville Chamberlain toward Nazis and fascist Italy between 1935 and 1939. At the beginning of the 1930s, such concessions were widely seen as positive due to the trauma of World War I, second thoughts about the vindictive treatment of Germany in the Treaty of Versailles, and a perception that fascism was a useful form of anti-communism. Lord Rothermere also had several meetings with Hitler and conspired behind the scenes in support of appeasement. Rothermere made his first visit to Hitler in December 1934. That evening, Hitler held his first major dinner party he had given for foreign visitors at his official residence in Berlin since he had taken office. The high-level guests included Goebbels, Goering, and von Ribbentrop. On December 20th, 1934, Rothermere returned the hospitality, hosting a dinner at Berlin's famous Hotel Adlon with Princess Stephanie. 25 guests attended, including Hitler, Germany's Foreign Minister Konstantin von Neurath, Joseph and Magda Goebbels, and Goering, accompanied by the actress Emmy Zonnemann. A picture of Hjalmar Schacht, chairman of the not the Bank of England, and Hitler. That must be a typo because I think he was actually the chairman of the Deutsche Bank or the Reichsbank, whatever it was called at the time. And Montague Norman was the chairman of the Bank of England. So might be one for the editor there, I can't explain it otherwise. Also invited was British banker Ernest Tennant, a friend of Joachim von Ribbentrop, German ambassador to Britain. Tennant was one of the principal founders of the Anglo-German Fellowship, a membership organization which existed from 1935 in response to the Duke of Windsor's speech, which called for a closer understanding of Germany in order to safeguard peace in Europe. Members included Bank of England Director Frank Cyril Tiarx, Admiral Sir Barry Domville, Prince von Bismarck, Montague Norman of the Bank of England, there you are, and Geoffrey Dawson of the Cliveden Set. Corporate members included such leading organizations as Price Waterhouse, Unilever, Dunlop Rubber, Thomas Cook and Son, the Midland Bank, and Lazard Brothers, among others. The fellowship and its sister organization in Berlin, the Deutsche Englische Gesellschaft, hosted grand dinners at which Rudolf Hess, von Ribbentrop, General Werner von Blomberg, the Duke of Brunswick, and the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha would be guests of honor. Ernest Augustus, the Duke of Brunswick, was a grandson of George V of Hanover, whom the Prussians had deposed from the Hanoverian throne in 1866, and Christian IX of Denmark. Through his mother, he was a first cousin of Nicholas II of Russia. He married Princess Victoria Louise of Prussia, the daughter of Kaiser Wilhelm II. After his abdication in 1936, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor visited the couple at Cumberland Castle in Gmunden, Austria. The spies Guy Burgess and Kim Philby, seeking to disguise their communist affiliations, joined the fellowship, recognizing that it was widely perceived as allied to the far right. Of German descent himself, like his wife, Tiarx was also listed as a member of Mosley's British Union of Fascists. Throughout 1936, several members, including Dawson, Lord Astor, and Thomas Jones, traveled to Germany to meet with Hitler, Ribbentrop, Hermann Goering, and Werner von Blomberg. In September 1936, Dawson and David Lloyd George met with Ribbentrop, Hitler, and Rudolf Hess in a series of meetings where they reiterated their desire for peace with Germany. While the Milner Group was busy giving Hitler the false impression that England was ready to make an alliance with Germany, they also were attempting to further influence their own government to this policy. According to Carol Quigley, quote, "It goes without saying that the whole inner core of the group and their chief publications, such as the Times and the Round Table, approved of the policy of appeasement completely and prodded it along with calculated indiscretions when it felt necessary to do so." When Chamberlain became prime minister, the Cliveden Set again used their connections as a means of influence. Several times in 1937 to 38, Chamberlain stayed at Cliveden, and many other times he dined there. In 1938, Hitler asked Stephanie to meet in Germany with Goering, who told her, quote, that it was no bluff, that Hitler would soon declare war, and that only he could prevent this if he had a meeting with Lord Halifax. Lord Halifax was a signatory to the April 1919 Lauder petition calling for harsh peace terms against Germany in the Treaty of Versailles, then being negotiated. In October 1925, Lord Halifax became Viceroy of India. Lord Halifax and Lothian were participants in the Round Table Conferences of 1930 to 32, organized by the British government and Indian political personalities to discuss constitutional reforms in India. Lord Irwin made a controversial statement declaring that India should be eventually granted dominionship. The culmination of events were settled by the Gandhi-Irwin Pact of 1931, after which the civil disobedience monument and the boycott of British goods were suspended in exchange for a second Round Table Conference. Discussions led to the passing of the Government of India Act in 1935. Because there were some senior figures in the Nazi Party who were against negotiations with Britain, Stephanie kept the arrangements a secret from von Ribbentrop. On her return to London, Stephanie asked her friend Lady Snowdon to arrange a meeting with Lord Halifax. Although Lord Halifax was initially suspicious of Stephanie, after obtaining permission from Chamberlain, he agreed to meet with Hitler's representative, Fritz Wiedemann. It has been claimed that Halifax told Wiedemann that the British government was sympathetic to Hitler and that he had a vision that, quote, Hitler would ride in triumph through the streets of London in the royal carriage along with King George VI, unquote. On September 30th, 1938, Chamberlain met with Adolf Hitler at his home in Berchtesgaden. Hitler threatened to invade Czechoslovakia unless Britain supported Germany's plans to annex the Sudetenland. Chamberlain informed Hitler that his proposals were unacceptable. Cliveden Set member Neville Henderson pleaded with Chamberlain to go on negotiating with Hitler. Henderson believed that the Treaty of Versailles was far too harsh on Germany, and if only terms of Versailles could be revised in German favor, then another world war could be prevented. Henderson had regular meetings with Joseph Goebbels and became Hermann Goering's best friend. Henderson accepted Goering's invitation to attend the 1937 Nazi Party rally in Nuremberg. Before leaving for Germany, Henderson read a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf. On March 16, 1938, Henderson had written to Lord Halifax, setting out his view that, quote, British interests and the standard of morality can only be combined if we insist upon the fullest possible equality for the Sudeten minority of Czechoslovakia, unquote. The meeting ended with Hitler, Chamberlain, Edward Daladier of France, and Mussolini signing the Munich Agreement, which transferred the Sudetenland to Germany. In return, Hitler promised not to make any further territorial demands in Europe. After the signing of the Munich Agreement, Wiedemann sent a letter to Rothermere stating, You know that the Fuhrer greatly appreciates the work the Princess did to straighten the relations between our countries. It was her groundwork which made the Munich Agreement possible. Chamberlain returned to England, announcing his infamous Peace for Our Time speech outside 10 Downing Street while waving the Munich Agreement. Quote, My good friends, for the second time in our history, a British Prime Minister has returned from Germany, bringing peace with honor. I believe it is peace for our time. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Go home and get a nice, quiet sleep. Unquote. Well, the next section is called War or Peace in America. And here we have Sir William Wiseman, British intelligence agent, round table member, and partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Stephanie von Hohenlohe and Wiedemann visited the United States in 1937, where they linked up to fraternity friends such as Sosthenes Bain. Remember Sosthenes Bain? He's all over the Higgman book, Trading with the Enemy. He's the IT&T boss. Walter Teagle and Edsel Ford. According to Martha Schad, the author of Hitler's Spy Princess, Hitler discovered that Wiedemann was having an affair with Stephanie. Quote, Early in 1939, the game of hide-and-seek around the Princess Stephanie and Fritz Wiedemann came to an abrupt end. Hitler found out that Wiedemann was Stephanie's lover. Unquote. Hitler deported Wiedemann to San Francisco as Consul General, where he was head of the Orientgruppe, the SD network that encompassed the whole Pacific Basin, including the North and South American coastal states, Thailand, Malaya, Hong Kong, mainland China, Formosa, and Japan, while at the same time collaborating with the British and the Americans. Well, I think it's going to be a little bit too much for me to read all the way through the rest of the article this hour, so we'll have to have a part 3. But I think it's worth taking it slow. You know, there's so many names involved, but hopefully you're getting the impression that I've got that there's a whole lot more to this Cliveden Set than we have been told so far. And American, German, Russian, especially look at the White Russians and the Imperial Russian descendants when we look into what was really behind the things that led to World War II. So let me say hello to everyone in the chat room. Thank you very, very much for joining me, and thank you for your support at my Patreon, which is just John O'Loughlin. And I will see you guys tonight. Now, tonight I've got a very interesting and first time interview with Anastasia Battle of the Schiller Institute, and she is the publisher of their publication Lenore Magazine, a magazine about the arts, music, culture, published by the LaRouche Organization and the Schiller Institute. And she is one of their real go-getter um, uh, um, interveners in the political system by making loud, important statements at the press conferences of very, very important politicians. Uh, One of the people I really admire when I see her in action. So I look forward to meeting her better and getting to know her better tonight at 8 p.m. here on McDuff Lives. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.